everyone, and welcome again to the Open Mic, the show where every week I talk to writers, editors, agents, all kinds of folks from the publishing game to learn about them, their work, and how they do what they do. Sometimes I'll talk to playwrights and songwriters, really anybody who can make a living writing words, because it's not an easy endeavor. I'm your host, Rich Ehisen, and today I'm joined by somebody I'm really happy to welcome him, because he is versatile, eclectic, prolific, award-winning, the one, the only Bobby Nash. And I want to be clear before I let him talk here. When I say versatile and eclectic, I mean it. The man writes novels, novellas, comic books, short stories, the occasional screenplay, and when he's not writing his own words, he might appear in front of the camera interpreting somebody else's words as an actor. And even within all those, he writes crime fiction, thriller, various other things. The man is a dynamo. So before I let myself just keep going on, Bobby, I'm exhausted just saying all that. How are you doing today? Welcome to the Open Mic. It's a real honor and pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rich. Sorry I had to take a drink. Some friends of mine made a drinking game out of every time I hear the word prolific.
I'm sure, because I'm sure it gets used on you a lot when I look at your body of work. Let me ask you.
It's been. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say the bulk of your writing is probably in the thriller and crime fiction genres, but as I noted, you do a lot of things. How do you describe yourself as a writer?
I usually just call myself a writer. Occasionally, I'll say author, but mostly when people ask what I do, I just say writer. I do get to bounce around a lot. I'm very fortunate to do that. I can write multiple genres, and just because of what I've done over the course of my career. Because I do work for publishers, as well as having my own indie press. And a lot of times with working with other publishers, you'll get an email going, "Hey, we are doing an anthology about insert your favorite genre here. Would you be?" And sometimes that allows me the chance to play in a genre, like, you want to write a Western? Well, sure. I can write a short story Western, kind of scratch a creative itch, as opposed to trying to do a Western novel. So I've been very fortunate to play around in multiple genres.
Do you have one that you consider to be your favorite? Again here. Okay. Please finish.
That's okay. Probably novellas are my favorite, just because of the length of them. I can tell a good story there. It allows me to with a short story, it's very much just tell the plot. With a novel, you get more character development time, and I like that. And with a novella, I can kind of wrap it up without having to, I can tell smaller stories that are not as world ending or big catastrophe or something. It could be a smaller story. So for the stuff I do through my own publishing imprint, I do a lot of novella series, just because I like that format.
I do too. I've always really liked the novella series, and for those who maybe aren't terribly familiar with novellas, I mean, if you've seen The Shawshank Redemption, that might be one of the classic novellas turned into now a classic movie. I mean, the format, the genre really does give you a lot of leeway to tell good stories in a little tighter of a format than novels. So I will have to check out some of your novella series. You describe yourself as a hybrid author, meaning you do both some indie publishing and then some traditional publishing.
Correct.
That's becoming more and more popular these days. Why do you choose this particular path? And do you ever see yourself maybe just choosing one or the other?
When I first started, I've been doing this a while. When I first started, do it yourself model that is so prevalent today was not an option. Back, because I started pitching and stuff in the late 80s, and I didn't sell my first story until the early 90s. And back then, if you were doing it yourself or doing print on demand or self-publishing, that just meant you failed writer who this was your only option. And really people looked down on it. It was a very tough to sustain like it is today. So my earliest thoughts of publishing was I've got to find a publisher or I've got to find an agent. And I've never found an agent, but I have found publishers. And so I started doing work for publishers. It wasn't until later, my first novel was called Evil Ways, and it came out from a horrible, horrible publisher. It's a terrible experience. But it was my first novel. I had a novel in my hand, and that actually led to finding other work because I had a book I could show publishers. But it was a horrible experience. So when my contract was up, the option was either to renew it or take it back. So I took it back. And I started shopping it around to other publishers and just could not find a fit that was good, that where we were all happy. And it was coming around that time where self-publishing was not really being looked down on as much. So I re-released it through my own company just to get it back out into the public eye. And then when I wrote a couple of other things that were kind of in the same universe, split those up. So, my second novel I did myself. And then I would go off and do some work for other publishers, and I'd come back. And it wasn't until the Snow books that I started, using self-publishing more as for new stuff, as opposed to here's my other stuff that's re-released or whatever. I sold Snow to a publisher, and the publisher went out of business. And they were doing novellas, and actually they were just doing ebook novellas. I actually kept the print rights, so I was going to collect every three, because every three novellas is about the size of a full-length novel. And so when I got my rights back, there weren't a lot of publishers doing novellas at the time, and so it was either rewrite it or do it myself. And I liked the format, so I decided to just re-release the one that had been released and the others that I had written. And I was lucky enough that it found an audience, so I'm continuing to do those. And so that was kind of where I started going, oh my gosh, I'm a publisher.
Well, it sounds very organic. I mean, I'll tell you, I admire that a lot. I find the story interesting because I certainly, over the course of these many years, talking to, writers of all genres, going back again, long time, I think the one consistent theme that that seems to apply across all of them is most writers don't think in an entrepreneurial way. I think that's changing, and I think it's changing simply for a lot of reasons of what you described. You're almost forced into doing it. But I think if you take an entrepreneurial mindset into your work from the beginning, you'll probably be far better off. Because as you noted, I think most of us, me included, I have to get an agent and I have to get a big publishing house, and this is the only way I will ever be considered a quote unquote success as a writer. But you've proven, well, that's not the case. You can now come at this from a variety of different ways.
I wish I had known earlier, like back when I was in college, I wish I had known that being a writer was being a small business owner. I would have certainly taken more business classes. I've studied business. I would have learned more of that, because that is stuff I've had to learn later. And because nobody, like I said, back then, writing was something you did. It wasn't a business. You did it for people. You were an employee. And I've certainly learned a lot about how to run my own business. I've learned a lot of stuff by screwing stuff up, failure being the best teacher. I'm very self-taught on a lot of the stuff I've done. And, I've made some blunders that have led to great epiphanies of, oh, I should do it this way.
Well, I used to say failure is a great teacher, and I think it's one of those things. We talk hear this all the time now. Is a lot of people talking about parenting. They're afraid to let their kids fail, and gosh, I mean, that is a lot of times. You don't want to die in the process, but for the most part, if you don't die, it's probably the best way to learn something. Hey, don't play with that rattlesnake or whatever. Whatever
Right.
it might be.
Probably one of the best things about learning to ride a bicycle was falling off the bicycle, because you realize I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, I'd like to stay on two wheels. That's a good idea. What? So I like I say, I've been reading some of your stuff, and I love some of the characters already that I'm reading, and I always wonder when I read things like yours, where there's characters are these big, bold, lots of stuff going on, lots of smartassery and things like that, which I just love. What makes for a really great character for you? When you start formulating these things, what kind of character interests you as a writer?
I love characters with some flaw, with some, yes, they can be this bigger than life hero, but there's always something that, either they can suffer from imposter syndrome, or they can, they're afraid to fail, or they're afraid of this, or, it gives them some kind of real quality to latch on to. With everything I do, I tend to start with the character. I want to get to know them, like as if I was meeting and getting to know a real person for the first time. Because then once I know that character well, that can help move the story in a different way. Because character, a friend of mine once told me that a story was when character and plot meet. And I always like that. And it because what can happen is every character does not approach the same situation the same way. Take three characters from, and it doesn't to yours, like any character from TV, from movies, from books, for whatever. Take three characters and drop them into the exact same plot, and you will get three different stories based on how that character responds to things. So getting characters is my first goal. I want to get in, understand why they do what they do. I as you mentioned, I'm a big fan of smartassery. I blame Spider-Man for that. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics, and he put on that mask, and suddenly he was a comedian. But yeah, so yeah, I love it, getting to know the characters, and that was one of the things that I learned early. I took a writing class when I was writing my first novel, and it was one of those evening classes at the college. And part of our thing was reading aloud to the other authors in class our work. And my first novel is called Evil Ways, and the two protagonists are these brothers. And I was reading the scene where the two brothers come back together. They haven't seen each other in a few years, and they come together, and it's the reunion scene. And I wrote it, and I read it, and the response was not what I expected. I was getting responses like, other than the fact that you tell us these guys are brothers, they don't feel like brothers. And I didn't know really how to unpack that. So when I went back home, I said, I'm going to redo this chapter for next week. How do I solve this? And I realized, wait, I have a brother. How do we act? So I gave one of the characters his personality, one mine, wrote it thinking of them that way. And suddenly the response to this chapter was so much greater, because they feel like brothers now. And so that was an eye-opening experience for me. So I started doing that quite a bit, especially in those early days. The template for characters would be, like I might take you, for example. You're the template for a character, and then I would build on to your personality to build this character. So there would be something real I could go back and touch on and go, oh, I know how Rich talks. That's my start, and I can kind of go that way. I don't do it necessarily as much that way now, because I've been doing it a while. I don't have to pick a person, but I can pick archetypes. You know, do I want somebody that's loud and bombastic? Okay, I know what that person is. That's my template. I can build from there. Do I want someone shy and reserved? Okay, I know somebody like that. That's my template. And then I can build characters from there. And that helps me tremendously getting to know them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A thing that I'm working on now. I know I struggled with it for a long time, and I did something similar where it takes place in a previous situation I was in for a long time, and not in jail or anything like that. But there are particular kinds of people. I'm a reporter, so it's a group of people I was covering, and I realized, well, everything I'm having these people say and do doesn't sound anything like those people. So think about that. What were they like, right? And I think the average person who doesn't spend time in that world would maybe not even think, about it. Like that kind of interaction goes on, but it does. It absolutely does all the time. And I go back to, I remember reading this. I wish I had heard from him directly, but I remember reading, oh God, now I'm going brain dead. The writer who wrote The Wire, talking about, who was a crime reporter for the Baltimore Sun for a long time. The scene, most people, if they've seen The Wire, they remember Omar jumping out of the fourth floor of a parking garage to escape the bad guys, right? And somebody asked him, well, come on, did that really happen? And his response was, well, no, not really. It didn't happen quite that way. He actually jumped from the sixth floor, but I didn't think anyone would believe that he survived that. But so yes, these templates that you talk about, I think is an interesting way to approach writing.
Yeah, because I talk to people that are not writers, and they think we're crazy because we say, it's like, oh, my character wouldn't do that. The character wouldn't let me do this. And they're like, aren't you the writer? Can't you make them? And I was like, doesn't really work that way.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Which do you enjoy writing more, good guys or bad guys?
Ooh, good guys are fun because I usually spend more time with the good guys, but I do like to spend a fair amount of time with the bad guys. And bad guys are a lot of fun because they do get to do bad stuff. But the trick with bad guys is always finding that one redeeming quality, Now, there's certain things like certain types of genres or comic booky things, you got more larger than life, want to rule the world characters. But even Dr. Doom loves his mother,
Right.
There's something, there's something that you can latch onto that goes, okay, we'll feel a little sorry for them because of this, or, damn it, they're just so charming.
Right.
One of my favorite villains in recent years, he started a book, but they really fleshed him out when it moved to TV. And that was the character of Boyd Crowder from Justified.
Yes.
Who is, for all the despicable stuff he does, you can't help but root for the guy to win because he's so charming.
Yes.
And I love that about a good villain. They're, you wouldn't care. You want them to get caught if they're the mustache twirling, ha 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 ha. I'm gonna kill a bunch of people for no reason. But if you understand why they're doing what they're doing, sometimes you get to root for them, and you kind of, they can't win, but you kind of want them to.
Right.
And so, yeah, so that can be a lot of fun. And on the other side of it, your heroes, I don't like heroes that are just always perfect. Let our heroes screw up a little bit, or, let our hero make a decision that's not heroic, but done for a heroic reason. Those kind of things are fun to play with. But yeah, villains are fun.
Well, Boyd Crowder, the Boyd Crowder character, and I highly encourage anyone who hasn't watched Justified to go back and just watch even a few episodes to get the meaning here. But not just Boyd Crowder, everybody in Justified. One of the things I loved about that show was the use of language. I mean, they're in Harlan County, Kentucky. A lot of people have a particular, probably a vision in their head of what, somebody from Harlan County, Kentucky would be like and sound like. But their language in a way was almost Shakespearean. the way that because they were so clearly, Boyd Crowder in particular was clearly so smart and so sophisticated in a way that you would not expect a character like that to be. And I loved the way everybody had that same, it was almost like a character unto itself, the way they used language on that show. And it was hard sometimes to tell the good guys from the bad guy, because the bad guy was not this evil, hick from the backwoods who filled every bad stereotype that we might have in our head. He was brilliant in his own way. And you said he was very charming.
Yeah. And even our hero had the moments of, being less than heroic. Raylan,
yes.
Raylan would do things that, there's a great line in there about talking about Raylan. It's like, you're a great lawman, you're a lousy marshal.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And,
yes.
But when I think of Boyd, there's one line that always sticks out to me, because like you said, Boyd speaks in this very, higher educated way. Like, I don't hurry up. He tells people, like, with alacrity, gentlemen, but there's one scene in there where they've got a gun on some people, and they've said something to Boyd, and Boyd goes, I have been accused of many things. Being inarticulate ain't one of them. And I love the fact that they used like this $4 word articulate with ain't, because it really fits the character.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about Pulp Fiction. You're big into Pulp Fiction. For someone who might not know what that means, and again, I think there's a lot of folks who might just think of just the movie Pulp Fiction and not understand what the whole genre is about. Tell me a little bit about Pulp Fiction. Well, first, what attracts you to it, and then how you define it.
Well, it's hard to. It's one of those things that, like, how to define it has been debated a lot. But basically, it's a throwback to the types of stories and the way they told the stories in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when this disposable, a lot of it was considered men's adventure. But that's I think that just does it a disservice, because there were romance pulps. There were these small paperbacks that people would buy. The old dime novels are a good example, I would say, of Pulp Fiction. They were inexpensive. You bought them, you read them, you throw them away, or you traded them. They weren't anything anyone expected to keep, which is probably, excuse me, why they're sorry. There's something about getting on a podcast always makes me belch. I don't know what it is.
No problem.
It's I think the fact that they were such disposable entertainment is why they're worth money today, the few surviving ones. But they were generally quick stories. They were usually short stories or novellas. They weren't promoting a message, or the plot could be something simple as there's bad guys trying to rob the Federal Reserve, the good guys got to stop them. That's your plot. Go. There's a lot of science fiction came out of the pulps, but the pulps were these short stories, and they told stories in every genre. I mean, kind of what we think of today as pulp are more the hero things, Doc Savage and The Shadow, but there were sports pulps, which was just stories about sports players. There were train pulps. The train pulps lasted for decades, and it was just stories about people on trains. There were the hero pulps, the pilot pulps, the romance pulps. I mean, there was a pulp for everything, and they were printed on such cheap paper. They weren't expected to last, and again, like I said, it was a disposable entertainment. So, but the stories resonated with people because you were getting them quickly. I mean, they were putting out Doc Savages fairly regularly. They did a lot of house names. I write a character called Domino Lady these days, who was from the 1930s and appeared in 6 stories. No one knows who actually wrote them because the name was a house name. So no one knows if the same person wrote all 6. Could have been 6 different, right? Nobody knows. But the character endured because people fell in love with the characters, similar to like Secret Agent X or Doc Savage or blah, blah, blah. And so in recent years, probably in the last decade or so, smaller publishers have glommed onto a lot of these characters have fallen into public domain. So like me, I write Domino Lady stories for Moonstone, but Domino Lady is a public domain character. And I believe at present there's like 4 different publishers doing Domino Lady stories because, you know, she's open to, you know, for people to use. And so with when it's, there's this group New Pulp, which has kind of been this thing that's been this tag that's been put on people doing new pulp type stories. For multiple publishers are using it. And around the time that it started out with people going, "Ooh, I always wanted to write these characters, so we'll do new stories with those characters." And that led to people creating new characters in the same vein. So you've got new characters that kind of recapture that feeling of the old pulps. You're not necessarily mimicking the writing style, but mimicking the feel. And so those are a lot of fun to, you know, it's the kind of thing you can read in 2 or 3 days. And so those are fun to play with. I like to think of them as like, you know, it's almost like watching TV, you know, watching an episode of Tarzan or The Lone Ranger. It's that kind of story. You know, we're not spending a lot of time, you know, following characters as we are following the story. And then that's kind of what pulp is. Now, ask 10 other pulp writers, you'll get 10 other answers.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of that. I mean, I think we all agree it's very fast paced. It's not, we're not spending a lot of time smelling the roses. We're like, you know, let's go do whatever the plot is we need to do.
Right. You also write comic books, and I'm really interested in that because I read comic books all the time as a kid. What's the appeal of comics for you? Do you have a favorite kind or style?
Comics were my first love. I fell in love with comics at a very early age. Again, I blame Spider-Man. It was the cartoon. The cartoon got me. You know, we used to watch reruns of the 60s cartoon after school. And so I fell in love with Spider-Man. I remember very clearly the first 3 comics that I ever purchased, and I still have them. I remember my mom and I were in Zayre's, which is a store that doesn't exist anymore. And there in the checkout, they would package 3 comics in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
And you could see 2 of them, but that third one was always a mystery. And I just was begging her to let me get these because there were 2 Spider-Man books. And I was like, let me, you know, and so I think just to shut me up, she bought them for me. And there were 3 issues of Spider-Man in there, back-to-back issues, which, you know, I just devoured those books. And at that point, I became a comic book fan. And so my goal, you know, it took me a little while, but I realized that, wait a minute, like they're paying people to write and draw these things. How cool is that? And so I went in it thinking, I'll be a comic book artist. Well, it turns out I'm not that good on the art side of things. But I was writing stories to draw. And in high school, I met other comic book fans who were doing their own comics. And some of them started asking me to write stories for them because they liked how I was coming up with stories. And that was kind of where my comic writing career began, was what I realized. A friend actually pointed out to me that, you know, you're splitting your focus. If you focused on either writing or the art, you'll get better. You know, splitting your focus, you know. And I guess he said it on the right day because I listened, because I can be stubborn. And so I decided to focus on the writing. And within 2 years, I had sold my first comic script. So there was something to his advice.
Let me follow up on that really quickly because you know, as I noted earlier, you know, you write across a lot of genres, and I think for a lot of folks listening to this or watching this might, I'm sure, thinking, well, yeah, but aren't we supposed to stick to one thing so that we don't confuse our audience and that kind of a thing? First of all, did anyone ever try to strong arm you into picking a genre and sticking to it? And, you know, did you ever consider that maybe just sticking to one genre?
Actually, no one's ever really strong arm. I've had a few people say you should probably just pick one and stick with it. But, you know, I did at one point consider like doing pen names for different genres. But then I realized, wait, then how are they going to know it's me? You know, when I'm promoting the, why are you promoting this guy that's not you? Because I do like to do a lot of promotion, make sure to get the word out there. I still have a few pen names in the back of my head that I may break out one day, but I just, because I'm not. Now, if I was working for like one of the big 4 New York Times publishers, I'm sure, because they get very set in. I mean, these are the people that told Stephen King, you can't write anything but horror.
Right.
And so he had to go create a pen name to write, there's multiple stories of big name writers who had to do that to prove, but at my level, working for a lot of indies and smaller presses and mid-level presses, it really hasn't been an issue. Now I get invites to do things based on what I do. I get a lot of crime fiction. I do a lot of crime fiction. So I get a lot of invites to pitch stuff to crime fiction or whatever. But the other one I get a lot is writing stuff for horror. I get tasked with that a lot. So it kind of goes through cycles of just what you get invited to be part of. So,
Sure.
But there's a thriller element to everything I do. So thriller is the great mixer. You can have a sci-fi thriller, you can have a crime thriller, you can have a horror thriller. So I can mix thriller with almost anything.
Well, I noted earlier too, and I want to follow up a little bit. One of the things that I really pick up from your writing instantly is that it seems like you are having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not, you're not being dragged to the keyboard, with a chain and, a gun held to your head. But that is how it feels, I think, for a lot of writers. For some reason, you read some things and you just think, God, this person doesn't seem like they're having any fun in the world. Now I get it. There are certain genres, that would be the case. But for something like what you do, or most thrillers, most crime fiction, even, I mean, the idea is to have some fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, like I say, I don't think every writer does. Have you always had that perspective of, this is fun, I enjoy this, or did you have some epiphany along the way where you're like, hey, I should be enjoying this? And how did you get to this point?
I have always tried to have fun with everything I do. That said, there was the point where I became a full-time writer. I got laid off from my day job. It's probably a familiar story to a lot of writers. I got laid off from my day job when the economy tanked in 2009, and I lost my job. And so it's like, you know what? I've got savings, this, blah, blah, blah. If there was ever a time to do it and give this a full-time shot, this would be it. And so at that point, I started accepting gigs from a lot of places. Some of them were not really my thing, but I took them anyway because I was like, I've got to make money if I'm going to call myself a stay full-time writer. So I did take on some gigs that I didn't enjoy as much. And like you said, I think I felt it. They were slogs to get through. It took me longer to write them because I just you start to lose interest or it's not working or it's not coming together. And so that really was, I did have a moment there where it's just like, okay, if you don't feel it, say no. That was the big epiphany, was you can say no, because there was this fear of, if I start saying no to projects, those publishers will stop asking.
Right.
And turned out not to be the case. It was like, because it was never just no, it was always no, because I don't think I'm the right writer for this. I've turned down a few things that have gone on to be quite popular, and I kind of kicked myself. But then again, I know I wasn't the guy for that.
Right.
And that's not what I do, or that I wasn't comfortable, or so there's different reasons now for why to say no. And that was where the big epiphany came in. It's like, what you want to do. don't accept a gig unless it sounds like it's going to be fun.
Right.
So yeah.
I only have a couple more here, but one of them I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your acting career. This is also was an early interest of mine. I pursued it a little bit in LA in my very younger days. Clearly, I was not successful because here I am. But I love the fact that you are doing this. How did you get into that? And is this something that you ever see yourself like doing on a full-time basis?
I started, part of the thing when I got laid off from the job was, my God, I'm home all the time, and you start getting a little stir crazy. I live in the Atlanta area, and this was around the time Atlanta became this hub
right.
of movies and TV. So a lot of when I started, it was doing background and extra stuff, and I've done a lot of that, and that's fun. But after a while, I moved into doing I've done a few movies with speaking roles. They're usually small roles. I'm not the star, I'm the plucky sidekick or the comic relief tech guy. I play him a lot. And I also play the angry fat guy a lot. I look the part. I don't know where the angry came from, but apparently I do it well. I've played that character a lot. And so it's just, it's a fun little side gig. I've never seriously thought of doing it full time. I'm not opposed to it, but I just, with my schedule and everything, it's, because I didn't want the writing to suffer, right? Because that was my job, my day job, to suffer to do all this stuff. So it's been more of a side gig, and I haven't done anything in the last few years. The last thing I did was we went in on Thursday and we filmed a Creep Show that's on Shudder. It became the holiday special. It was just supposed to be an episode of the new season. But we went in, I'm playing one of the Santas, like I'm a sword wielding Santa hunting werewolves. And we go and we film. We're outside. It looks gorgeous and cold, but it was so hot because it's Georgia. And so we're all in Santa suits and we're running. And so we do this on Thursday. We're supposed to come back Monday and film the stuff on the inside. So we would be fighting werewolves and stuff on the inside. Great. Oh, it should be fun. The quarantine went into effect that weekend. So so that was the last thing I think I did. So it's been a while. And it used to be, it's like, we need someone on Thursday. Can you do it? Yes. Now we need someone on Thursday, but you've got to go on Tuesday and get a COVID test, Wednesday and get a COVID test, then Thursday. Now I'm out 3 days. I appreciate the fact that they are being careful and taking, health seriously, but I don't live in the city. So for me, every one of those is a 2-hour trip there, being there, 2-hour trip. That's a day. I kill a day.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to lose 3 days. Whereas before it was like, I'd go kill a day, And so I haven't been doing it as much. I would love to get back into it more again. But it's fun. I've worked with some wonderful, wonderful people. I always win that Kevin Bacon 6 Degree game because I'm in a scene with him in the following. I played an FBI agent on that for 3 days. That was fun. But yeah, so I've been on the big screen. I've been on the little screen. There's a great shot of me for 1 week. I was in the #1 movie of all time in Dumb and Dumber 2. There's a big shot of me on the big screen standing next to Jim Carrey looking annoyed. So there's a few places where I get recognized a lot from my appearance on Doom Patrol.
Okay.
Which is weird. So I had this big beard and my hair was a little longer. And so they dressed me up because it was this big party with a bunch of, they called us the weirdos. We were all weirdos. And so like they glued like gems to my face, and my face was gold partly. But they put me in this black and gold suit with one of the golfer hats. And so everybody was like, "You look like George R.R. Martin." So I was like, Disco George is what I was called for like a week.
Oh, I love
And
it.
so yeah, so that was fun. So little things like that are just, and as a comic book guy, who does a lot of conventions, saying, "Hey, I was on Doom Patrol" is pretty cool.
I bet.
So, but yeah, so it's fun. I enjoy doing it. I'd love to do more, but it's hard to juggle that and the writing as a full time thing.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, I've only got one last question. I like, as I said in the beginning, I like this to be a fun question. So let me spring this on you. Let's just say I had the power to put you together in a room for dinner, a drink, whatever, what have you, a good conversation with any one of the following three people. Who would you choose and why? And the three options I'm going to give you are the great Raymond Chandler, Bram Stoker, or Lon Chaney. I can put you together with any one of those three people for any kind of a conversation, dinner, drinks, whatever. Who would you choose and why?
Wow, that's tough because I do like all of those guys. Um, I would probably I would probably choose Raymond Chandler just to pick his brain about writing, writing crime and writing the like me, he liked to kill people, you know. So I think we would have a great discussion about what we do and why we do it. I'm always fascinated with talking to other writers, and I talked earlier about how like failure, you learn a lot from failure. I also learn a lot from meeting other writers. I've been very fortunate over the years of doing conventions and working with various publishers to get to know some very talented men and women who have become friends. That's the nice bonus. And being able to just sit around and talk craft, you know, without, especially when you're doing it without an audience, because when you're in front of an audience, you temper your answers a lot with, but just sitting around at a convention at the bar, or hanging out in somebody's hotel room, just a bunch of us sitting around, just being people and talking about what we do and the ups and the downs and the problems. The nice bonus of all of that is when I do run into stumbling blocks, I have people I can call who understand. Like if I tell somebody in my family, "Oh, this plot's not working," so just make it work. They don't, because they don't understand what we do. Being able to talk to people who get it, who are in that same boat, is a great, help, like cheerleading thing or whatever. It's also great when I can, because we sign a lot of NDAs as writers. And I do know that there's a few writers I can at least go, "Oh my God, I've got to tell you this. Don't say anything." But, and I've shared that information with one person who understands that I can't go blab it to the world. Things like that are cool. So having meeting and talking to other writers, and I think talking with Chandler would be cool because for all the similarities of writing, I imagine there were also differences of the time period
Yes.
that he was writing in, as opposed to what I'm doing. I can't imagine going through and writing without my laptop, because copy and paste and move and
Oh yeah.
I am constantly coming forth, and I'm on chapter 12 and I go, "Oh, this is a good thing. I should go set that up. Let me go back to chapter 3." I can't imagine how they, because I
They went
learned
through a
to
lot
type
of
on
paper.
yeah, I learned to type on a typewriter, but yeah, it's like every time you change something, you've got to like do it all over, and it's just like,
Yeah. I think Raymond Chandler and all those folks went through a lot of paper.
oh yeah, yeah. And I imagine they had sore fingers too, because
Yeah.
especially on a manual typewriter, you've really got to put
Yeah.
some,
Yeah.
you know.
Big ink bills, the whole deal.
Oh yeah, yeah. But
Well, Bobby,
what they were able to accomplish doing that though is
oh
truly
God,
astounding.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I can't even. It's hard now to fathom how we talk about prolific. Imagine being prolific in that time
Mhm.
frame. That was a whole different thing. Bobby, thank you so much. I don't want to keep you. This has been a really interesting conversation. To something you just said, I hope everyone who watches my show or listens to the podcast, I do this a lot for what Bobby was saying here. You know, we don't all get a chance to sit down and talk with other writers about stuff, what's going on in our particular challenges, queries, interests. Well, that's what the open mic is all about. You get an opportunity to listen to other writers talk about writing and about their work and how they do what they do and why they do what they do. So hopefully, if you're out there, you're getting some real value out of this. I certainly hope you are. Folks like Bobby, I really appreciate you sharing all this time and insight with us and with my audience. Can't ask for anything better than that. You know, what can I say? So on behalf of Bobby Nash, if you haven't picked up one of Bobby's books, highly recommend it. He's a fun read, fun writer, and as you can tell, a good guy. So hey, check him out. In the meantime, I'm Rich Eisen. This has been the Open Mic. Join us again sometime soon. I'll bring some more great, interesting writers to you to talk about what it is they do and how they do it. And until then, I'll just leave you with one thing. Tomorrow is not promised to any of us, so make today count. Bobby, thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.